Today's scripture reading comes from Psalm 51. Have mercy on me, O God, because of your unfailing love, because of your great compassion, blot out the stain of my sins. Wash me, clean me from my guilt, purify me from my sin, for I recognize my rebellion, and it haunts me day and night. Against you, and you alone, have I sinned. Have I done what is evil in your sight? You reprove right in what you say, and your judgment against me is just. For I was born a sinner, yes, from the moment my mother conceived me. For you desire honesty from the womb, teaching me wisdom even there. Purify me from my sin, and I will be clean. Wash me, and I will be whiter than snow. Oh, give me back my joy again. You have broken me. Now let me rejoice. Don't keep looking at my sins. Remove the stain of my guilt. Create in me a clean heart, O God. Renew a loyal spirit within me. Do not banish me from your presence, and don't take your Holy Spirit from me. Restore to me the joy of your salvation. Make me learn to obey you. And I will teach your ways to rebels, and they will return to you. Forgive me for shedding blood, O God, who saves. And I will joyfully sing of your forgiveness. Unseal my lips, O Lord, that my mouth may praise you. You do not desire a sacrifice, or I would offer one. You do not want a burnt offering. The sacrifice you desire is a broken spirit. You will not reject a broken and repentant heart, O God. Look with favor on Zion and help her rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. Then you will be pleased with sacrifices offered in the right spirit, with burnt offerings and whole burnt offerings. Then Lord will again be sacrificed on your altar. Let's pray. God, thank you for bringing us together today. I pray if you continue our service that you be with us and you bless us today. Amen. Amen. We join in the Prophet's Creed.
I believe in God, Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth. I believe in Jesus Christ, his only Son, our Lord, who was conceived by the power of the Holy Spirit, and born of the Virgin Mary. He suffered under Pontius Pilate, was crucified and died, and was buried. He descended to the dead. On the third day he rose again. He ascended to heaven, and is seated at the right hand of the Father. He will come again to judge the living and the dead. I believe in the Holy Spirit, the Holy Catholic Church, the communion of saints, the forgiveness of sins, the resurrection of the body, and the life everlasting.
So before we continue our service, I just want to remind us of our mission statement. Basically, all of this is one easy to read, easy to publish sentence. If you know God, love God, serve others. Which is something we talked about at the end a couple of weeks ago. We want to get this out in outreach, Sunday school, and anything we do. And so there are a few ways you can give. You can see them on the screen. If you need help with if you have questions about any of it, you can talk to Pastor Nathan. But let's take a look and ask God for forgiveness. God, we thank you for your provision for our church, and pray that you continue to provide for us, and that you give us wisdom to what to do with that provision, and what you are us with. Amen. Now we will discuss the kids in Sunday school, so that's for ages 4-year-olds to 4th grade. Let's take a moment and pray for them and their teachers. God, we thank you for the kids we bless you our church with. I pray as they go out to Sunday school that you will bless them, give them a good time, and bless their teachers who prepare them from this week. Amen. Amen.
We just have a few announcements. You'll find all of these on your little bulletin as well. You'll see the new image here. So we've had several different logos that have kind of floated around for a few years. This is the one that we finally came up with, and this is the one we're sticking with, I guess. If you have any questions about it or anything like that, please come talk to me. And you see it right on there. One of the things I love about it is that it has the know God, love God, serve others, right as part of the logo. So. Next conference, we've announced this a few times. If you would like to get registered for that, you can talk to me or Hope, and we can actually register you. If you would like to go, and the cost is an issue, the $25 and the $15, Yes, Colton?
They have a scholarship.
Oh,
No one sent me different type of scholarship. Just scholarship that no one else does.
so there is scholarships available. Sounds like Northwestern has some. We have some as well. And so if there's any, if you would like to go, and the cost is an issue, please just let us know. We'd love to help you get there. I've been there a few years, and honestly, it's a great time just to learn a lot about how to minister, especially to the next generation. And not just in like a youth group type setting, but even how the normal Sunday service can be a place where the next generation is able to serve and get involved and learn about the love of God. So I highly encourage you, if you're all interested, to do that. We also have a men's retreat, and this is in St. James. This is actually Abby's home church, Hosanna Free Lutheran Church. And the registration, this is a typo. It says March 24th, so it starts on March 24th, but that's going to be that Friday. We're not going Friday, we're going Saturday. March 24th at 8 a.m. And then there's going to be a lunch there. The cost is free. All it is just getting down there, and we can even do a carpool or something if you're interested. The deadline to sign up for that is March 12th. I've never been here personally, but Fulton has a few times. He said that he's really enjoyed it. So if you have questions about that, I'm going to steer you in his direction. He'll be able to give you answers.
Bring your son to
What was that?
Bring your son to
Okay. And then we also have a baptism service scheduled June 4th. We can do baptisms whenever, right? If you have come to know Jesus Christ and you're feeling led to be baptized, just come talk to me, and I'd love to do to baptize you. But we have several people who are interested in becoming baptized, so we'll be doing a baptism service June 4th. There's two different options that we have there. One is that I talked to the city of Jordan, and we can kind of rent the gazebo area, and they said we could have the service right there by the lake. The downside is we can't block anything off. So we might end up with people being baptized and people swimming around them at the same time. The other option that I was thinking of, because I really, after talking to people who want to be baptized, they're very interested in sort of an outdoor thing. So we could do it in the backyard here at the church, and then do like a potluck after and have something for the water. Just by a show of hands, who likes the first option more? Okay. Nick does? Do you like the lakeside one? So I'll give you a few seconds to think about it. So if you think it's a good idea, by show of hands, you just raise your hand. So who likes the first option more? Raise your hand. 7, 11. Who likes the second option more? Okay. You said you did too. So we have 2 for here in the backyard, 11 for at the lake. So moving forward, I will just do the lake, and we'll try to figure out to have somebody come in and not like officially block it off, but just kind of make it very obvious, like, hey, we're doing something here. That's not like the normal thing. And that should work out well. Great. Then there's also, so the 5th and 6th grade, we have Sunday school right now for 4 years old through 4th grade. Colton is going to be starting a 5th and 6th grade one that meets every other week, starting next week. Correct, Colton? Yep. And the reason it's every other week is one, so that Colton's not teaching that every single Sunday, because he'll be the one who's teaching that. But then also because we want to kind of transition people from the Sunday school setting into the larger church service, right? Because we want them to realize that they're part of the church before they go off to college or something like that. So if you have questions about that, please talk to Colton. You may see this picture on the screen, ooh, candy, you say. This is sent to us by Silas. And if you remember, we have sermon notes in the center. If you fill out these sermon notes and turn them in, you will receive candy. There's also the Christian ducks that we've said. There's many other things in there, little koozies and things. But so that's just kind of a fun incentive, I guess, to pay attention to the sermon and write the sermon notes. If you have any candy-related memes that would be appropriate for church and you think are funny, please send them my way, and I'd love to include them. Okay, we're going to invite Tim and Penny Iverson. They're missionaries with the Christian Missionary Alliance, and as they're walking up, we'll give them a round of applause. And then afterwards, there's going to be donuts and coffee. So if you'd like to stick around and talk to them, I would encourage you to do so.
If you will give me half of your candy, I will tell you right now what to fill in. I'm just going to be present. Okay. So, my wife and I serve in Taiwan, and I'll introduce this a little bit more fully, but I want to read you a letter, because we have a friend in Taiwan. Her English name is Patricia, and she was going to be visiting us here in America, and she had never been to America before, and she was concerned about the facilities over here. And so, thinking that I would understand her question, and because she would be staying in our house, she wrote to ask me about our WC. Now in Taiwan, they call the bathroom the WC. And so she wrote me a letter. I thought she meant the Wesleyan Church. So I wrote her the following reply. Dear Patricia, I am sorry to inform you that we do not have a WC. The nearest one is 9 miles southeast of here. It is a large WC, capable of seating 250 people at one time. People go there Sundays and Wednesday nights, and usually it is full. Therefore, it is best to go early to ensure getting a seat. The last time my wife and I went, it was so crowded we had to stand up the whole time. Oftentimes, when people go, they take their lunch along and make a day of it. It may interest you to know that there is a supper plan to raise money to buy new seats. This is good, as the old ones have holes in them. It will be held in the basement of the WC. I would like to say it pains me very much not to be able to go more regularly, but it is surely no lack of desire on my part. As we grow older, it seems to be more effort, particularly in cold weather. When you arrive, if you wish to go, I will accompany you and introduce you to all the other folks. Remember, this is a friendly community. My wife and I have been serving in Taiwan for 32 years, and I'm Tim, and that's Penny, and she is way better speaker, way better missionary than I am, and I know you'll enjoy her when she gets up here in a few minutes. And take good notes and get that candy. We want to say thank you above and beyond anything else I think that we say today. It's just thanks for what you're doing for the Lord, for world, as well as your community around you. You're giving financially, you're praying, you're supporting, you're doing all the good things. And you might be here, and we might be in Taiwan, but that doesn't put us up above you guys at all. We're not on some pedestal just because we're going overseas and doing our thing. So we really are partners in this, and we appreciate it so much for what we're doing together to get the gospel out around the world. So thank you very, very much for all you're doing. There is a question in the bulletin I saw about what more can I do to share the gospel. I think words to that effect. But I want to unpack that just a little bit when I get up in a few minutes after Penny's done. But we are partners in this. And so if you want to partner more specifically with us, we have some prayer cards that we had printed up, and Penny writes a prayer letter. Come and find us, and we'll make sure you get a prayer card and you can be praying for us, and get on a prayer letter list if you want to, and you can be up to date on what we're doing. And so, Penny, I'm just going to ask if you'll come up and share a few things, and then I'll come back up and do whatever it is I do.
I'm going to come over here, so out of the way of that. And we are glad to be here. This is our first weekend to ever be able to meet RiverRock Church. It's been a good weekend. And got a good taste of it a few minutes ago with Tim. So he's a little hard act to follow. Let me slide this over. Tim and I have been missionaries in Taiwan with the Christian Missionary Alliance for 32 years. And we love being part of this denomination. I'm going to share a little bit about that in a minute. But there's a slide here that I have that is a quote that I think came from the Alliance website. And I think it sums it up really well. It says, the Alliance is gospel presence, no matter what the location, how rugged the or how resistant the people. We go and we stay until the gospel takes root and bears fruit. I think that sums it up really well. If you're new to the Christian Missionary Alliance, if you don't have a whole lot of background in it, and I didn't grow up in this denomination either, you're going to find out pretty soon that that is really one of our what matters in the Alliance. It's making sure people have a chance to hear. And yeah, there have been missionaries that have gone on all over the world. We often call them international workers now because some places that they go, you can't be known as a missionary, you're going to get kicked out. I use the term missionary when I talk about what Tim and I do because in Taiwan we can openly go in as missionaries. We can openly share the gospel. So, but if you hear international worker, it's the same thing. But I love this because of that last line. We stay until the gospel takes root. Talks about resistant places. Taiwan is a resistant place. Not persecution, not hatred against Christians or anything like that. In fact, they view Christianity as a good religion, but not their religion. And so very few Christians in Taiwan, about less than 3% probably, openness to share the gospel, but not a lot of response. So that just gives you a little bit of a background. Now, when missionaries go to a new country, obviously one of the things they do is they have to learn a new language usually. And we did that. We spent the first 2 years learning Mandarin Chinese. We also learned a bit of Taiwanese, which is a local dialect there too. And you also have to learn a lot about the culture. That's a bit tougher. Some things are obvious and you can learn them pretty quickly. Do this, don't do that. But then there's the subtle things. And it's like, we come from our own background, our own way of looking at things, and sometimes things feel wrong. When in actuality, it's just a different cultural viewpoint. So one of those things that I've run into in Taiwan is whenever there's a big gathering of people, could be a community event, maybe a school graduation or some kind of a community holiday or something like that. You gather a group of people, and of course there's usually some fun stuff going on, but when the main speaker gets up to speak, it's like everything turns into chaos. Nobody seems to be listening. They're talking, they're on their phones, they're getting up, they're moving around. We've run into that when we do special evangelistic events in our church, maybe for Christmas. Same thing. They're there because, hey, Christmas looks like fun. They like all the fun parts of it. But just when you want them to be listening, it just seems like there's nobody connecting. But the one place that I've noticed it is in a funeral. Now, Taiwan funerals are a bit different than funerals here in America. One of the things that they do, especially in the countryside, when a person dies, the family will set up a tent outside the home. And that tent might block a whole lane of traffic. And the tent's going to be there for a week, maybe 2 weeks. The family's there at the tent the whole time. And people just pop in anytime during the day or evening and to pay their respects. But then there is an actual funeral service. The slide I have here is actually part of the traditions associated with a Buddhist funeral. What those people are, those are some of the family members that are actually crawling on their hands and knees as a sign of worship of the dead ancestor, the dead relative. And that's one of the things that we face, that people worship their ancestors, and that's something that's hard for them to break away from. But then in the funeral, they'll also have a gathering inside the tent, like we would have a service. Same thing. Some people are there for 5 minutes and then they're gone. They're in and out. You see them talking to one another during it, and some guy's outside the tent on his cell phone doing business. And from my cultural background, it doesn't feel right. It actually feels disrespectful. And then somebody explained something to me. They said, for a Taiwanese person, presence is participation. And all that means is, for that grieving family, they really don't care. If you're sitting quietly in your seat, listening to every word, you came. You showed up. Even for 5 minutes, you came. And that's what means the most to them, your presence. Presence is a powerful thing. We do that too in our culture, by the way. It looks a little different maybe, but when people are grieving, when they're sick, when there's happy occasions, we show up and we walk alongside people because being present is an important thing. And for us as believers, I think that's one of the things that sets Christianity apart from other world religions. God's presence with his people. I love this verse from the Old Testament where God says to Moses, my presence will go with you and I will give you rest. Think about that a second. God, the creator God, says, I will be present with you. My presence will go with you. That's pretty powerful. And then, as you know, in the New Testament, we see the culmination of Jesus coming to earth. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. God himself come to live life among us. And then after Jesus died on the cross and rose again, and he ascended into heaven, but he gave us his Holy Spirit, his followers. He gives his Holy Spirit with us 24/7, God's presence with his people. We don't always feel it. And if you're a believer, if you're trusting in him, yeah, you go through those times that are rough and it does not feel like God is anywhere near. But we hang on to that promise. My presence will go with you. He is with us. That's a powerful thing. But there's another aspect to that, to God's presence. He calls his followers to carry his presence through a lost and hurting world around us. You are the salt of the earth, he says. You are the light of the world. Let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. We're called to carry his presence to the people around us. For some people, you're the only way they're going to see who Jesus is, because you're living for him, and they see that in you. So he calls us, every one of us, to be present in this world. We rejoice with those who rejoice. We weep with those who weep. And so this morning, for my part here, Tim's going to share again too, but I want to tell you just a little bit about what it has looked like for us the last 3 years of this last term in Taiwan. What it's looked like for us to be present. And I'm going to tell you right now that, let's see, is it Stephanie? You set this up perfectly with what you shared this morning. Because I will tell you this, we had the absolute worst term that we ever had the last 3 years we were in Taiwan. But it was also, in many ways, the best term we ever had. And I'm actually going to share with you this morning some of the mess, some of the chaos, some of the stuff that it's really not very fun to tell. Not because I want you to think, oh, wow, these poor missionaries have it rough. No, what I want you to hear is how good our God is and what he does in the midst of the messiness of life and the chaos of life. And he did do powerful things. So I'm going to jump in here. What I like to do is call this a tale of two churches, because we actually worked with two churches the past 3 years in Taiwan, and both of them are church plants. So not fully independent type churches, still in the works. The one church is a rural church. The other church is a city church. One of those churches, in a way, it should never have survived the last 3 years because of some of the stuff that happened. The other church shouldn't have even gotten off the ground. Like I said, it's a new church. Shouldn't even made it. But both of these churches are testimonies to what God has done. So let me just jump in with Amazing Grace Church. In 2006, Tim and I moved to the countryside of Taiwan, to a small town. And actually our whole team was beginning to focus on more of the working class people and some of the least reached places in Taiwan. Like I said, Taiwan about 3% Christian, but in some of these communities it'd be maybe 0.5% Christian. Very traditional, very tough places. We knew it was going to be hard to start a new church there. We knew it would take some time. I don't think we realized just how long it was going to take or how tough it was going to be. Well, one of the things had to do with, after a few years, we did have a church started, a small group of people gathering, Amazing Grace Church. But one of the things that as missionaries we do, especially in the Alliance, is as quickly as possible, we want to see all of our churches, all of the ministries led by local believers. We don't want to see it dependent on missionaries coming from another place. This is their church. And so we prayed for a local Taiwanese pastor for Amazing Grace Church. And we could not get one. We prayed for 8 years for a pastor, and we could not get one. Number one is the countryside, and nobody wanted to move to the countryside. It's a very small church in one of the poorest places in Taiwan, so obviously, it wasn't exactly a place where life would be easy. And so that was a challenge. After 8 years, we finally had a pastor. And his English name, I share his English name, it's a little easier to remember, is Amos. Amos is a graduate of our Alliance Bible College in Taiwan. And he had actually been an intern at Amazing Grace Church while he was in school. He agreed to come on as a pastor. And he loved the church loved him, and we thought, this is going to be good. But things kind of began to fall apart. So Amos came in the summer of 2019, and because we had a local pastor there, we were beginning to transition out to a new place. We were even getting ready to move to a new community. But it was still a small, struggling church. The plan was that I would make trips back in to help out a little bit during that time. Tim left Amazing Grace Church after leading it for all those years. He left in January of 2020. In mid-February, Pastor Amos called me one day and said, I need to talk to you. Something terrible has happened. Now remember, he'd only been a pastor for about 7 months. And I was at our mission office, and he came over and met with me there, and he shared through tears that over the weekend he had a moral failure. And Amos was a single guy. He actually lived upstairs, an apartment upstairs in the church. Long story short, I don't need to go into all the details, but he, in desire to help someone out in need, he had allowed their woman to stay overnight in his apartment. One thing led to another. And he was truly repentant. But what he had done was very serious, and our national church, that's the Taiwan Alliance Church leadership, they immediately dismissed him, couldn't be the pastor. He needed to go through a time of real repentance. But the story gets worse, because the young woman that he was with, and we knew her a little bit, she really wanted to have a relationship with Amos, and that wasn't his intent. And so when he rejected her, she said that he had raped her. Now, only those two people in the Lord know really what happened. Amos was wrong in what he did. For our part, we do believe that he's saying that it didn't happen the way she said. But anyway, he was arrested, and he's currently serving a 5-year prison sentence. Messy story. Even in that mess, God is good. Amos hasn't left the Lord. I believe he's serving God where he is, and I believe God does have a future for him. And we can pray for the young woman that was involved as well. Again, messy stuff. But let me get back to Amazing Grace Church. That little church was devastated. And immediately we lost a few people. It's kind of like, well, we're out of here. This place is a mess. We'll go somewhere else. And so a small church was even smaller. And we were kind of back to square one. And our question was for Tim and I, what do we do? Do we turn around? We're already heading in a new direction. Do we turn around and come back in? Or, do we trust God for the next pastor? What do we do? And of course we prayed and sought the Lord, and our sense was that we needed to keep going. Like when I was already helping out at the church, and pray that God would intervene. But I'm going to tell you right now, our situation was hopeless. We prayed 8 years for a pastor before Pastor Amos came, and things were pretty rough. We were desperate, and the church was very discouraged. But this was, and actually some of our co-workers said, you know what, maybe it's time just to close things down here at this church and say, hey, we gave it a good try. Let some people to the Lord, send them to some other churches. Thankfully, that didn't happen. We stayed open. But this is the prayer that, as a church, we prayed. It's actually a promise God gave to Israel in the Old Testament. So he said, Lord, make this for us. From Jeremiah 3:15, God says, then I will give you shepherds after my own heart, who will lead you with knowledge and understanding. He said, God, you promised that long ago to people. Would you do that for us? We need you to provide shepherds for this little church. Pastor Amos left in mid-February. Beginning of May, we got a call from our national church president of Alliance, and he said, would your church consider a part-time pastor? We know this couple, good couple, they live up in the capital city of Taipei, but they want to stay up there because they have elderly parents that they're helping to take care of. Maybe I could talk them into coming down on weekends to help you guys out. And the church said, yeah, we're open. We'd like to meet them and see if this might work out. And so we arranged for this couple to come down. They hadn't said yes yet, and we didn't know if that would work out, but they came down and met with them. Almost from the moment they walked into the church, they said, we a couple, a Taiwanese couple, as co-workers that we love and respect as much as we do this couple. They've become great friends, and they're doing a fantastic job at Amazing Grace Church. They have a firm call. God's brought us here. We don't care what the salary is. We don't care how tough the ground is. We know God's called us here. And so they are a perfect fit. Now, I wish I could say that from then on out, everything went great. Everything was smooth sailing for the church, but that wasn't the case. Just as you faced COVID here, COVID hit Taiwan. We actually didn't get hit with quite as that first very deadly wave did not affect Taiwan as much, but it did. And around that time, I should say this too, panic was high in Taiwan as they were hearing about the rest of the world too. People were scared. Anyway, around that time, the church hired a Christian contractor to come down, do some work on the building. He lived up north where COVID was starting to gain ground. And he contracted COVID and didn't know it. He thought he just had bad cold and kept on working. Turned out to be COVID. He was hospitalized and this contractor died. That was the first case of COVID in this small town. I gotta tell you, small town, people are panicky, and so we became the COVID church. The church, of course, did everything right. When they closed down services, Pastor James went into quarantine. He was the only one that had contact with this guy. Thankfully, no one in the town contracted COVID as a result of that episode. But again, it was the COVID church. I'm sure people walked, all the way clear to the other side of the street to stay away. And it didn't impact our church members, but it impacted people we were reaching out to. The kids from our community that would come into the church for activities, parents would let them come back for quite a while. And it took a while to break through that again. But thankfully, made it through that episode. I don't think we're called the COVID church anymore. And then about a year and a half ago, it was another third hard blow. Again, common story. We had a church member who was kind of difficult personality, not just kind of. She was a difficult personality. And anyway, at one point, it just got kind of bad with her, and she decided to leave the church. But she didn't just leave the church. She went throughout the community spreading lies and gossip. And there is a sweetness there. There's a unity there, unlike anything that's been there for quite a while. And we're excited to see what God is doing and how He's continuing to lead Amazing Grace Church. I like to refer to that church as a church that Satan tried to kill, tried to destroy. But then it hit me. Every single church is a church that Satan is trying to destroy, including RiverRock Church. I don't know your whole past. I don't know what you're facing now. I definitely don't know what's coming, but I do know this. We have an enemy that does not want this church to continue. And if one tactic doesn't work, another one will. Or he'll try another tactic, I should say. But hang on to God, because He's got this, whatever you're facing. And hang on to each other as well. And get through it, looking to Him. Well, I said it was a story about two churches, so let me go on to the second one. We call this one in English Gushing Grace Church. Kind of a funny name. Sounds a little bit hillbilly, but it's a literal translation of the Chinese name of the church, which is Yong'an. Our team in Taiwan of missionaries, we had been looking for where the next church would be started and had chose the city of Tainan, which is the 6th largest city, found a district in Tainan that had really very few churches for the population, and then had found a place where there was a new development being built. No church at all. A lot of potential. And that was going to be the site of a new church. So when we began to transition out of Amazing Grace Church, it seemed like a natural fit for us to go to Gushing Grace, which wasn't there yet. It was just a community. The plan was this. We had a young family of missionaries that were in language study, and they were going to finish their language study and right about that time come back to the U.S. for their 1-year home assignment. The plan was they'd come back, move to this community, and start a new church. So for us, we were a little bit ahead of things. We said we can get there first and just kind of begin to build relationships. But you guys, this family, you're going to be the lead in this church plant. You know, they're young, they've got the energy and everything. That was the plan. So we moved. About a month and a half after we moved, we got kind of an unexpected email from this couple. They said, we decided we don't want to work with you two. Oh, ouch. And they had a bunch of different reasons, and they're a good family, a good couple, but, that was it. And we just said, no, we decided we don't want to work with the two of you. Now, we really believed that they were the ones that should start this church. Partly because the people moving into that community were young families, and this was a young family. Perfect fit. So we said, okay, we'll bow out. We'll go to another place. We want you guys to take the lead here. The problem was we just signed a 1-year rental lease on our house that we just moved into. So we were there for a year. Okay, no problem. While we're back in the U.S., we'll build relationships. We'll kind of lay a foundation as far as getting to know people, getting to know the community. When they come back, we'll move out and they'll take the lead. That was the plan. Well, I have to think about church planting, that there's some common sense principles. I'm not an expert. But there's some things that normally you do. One thing would be, if you're going to start a new church, you go where there are people, right? When we moved into that place, there was really nothing. This was a new development. Those buildings you see in the distance, that's a different community. Everything was new construction. They were building high-rise apartment buildings, townhouses, supermarket. Well, that hadn't started yet, but schools. And there was potential. In fact, the government says that within the next 8 to 10 years, there's going to be 30,000 people moving into this new community. We'd be the first church. But to start out with, kind of weird. Because who are we going to share the gospel with when we have no neighbors? We were about the third family to move into probably the first finished building. So kind of an odd place to be. How do we meet people? How do we make friends? Then one day, our next door neighbor, we did have a neighbor, he wasn't a Christian, still isn't, but he knew that Tim was a pastor, and he said to him one day, so have you started a church yet? No. He said, well, have you started a prayer center? Prayer center. We don't even know where he got that concept, because we don't see prayer centers in Taiwan. And we've not really heard that concept before either, but we got to thinking that's not a bad idea. Because we were holding back. We didn't want to get ahead. We didn't want to start a church. We were waiting for that couple to come back. But we can hang up a sign that says prayer center. And our thinking was, people aren't going to flock to a prayer center. People wouldn't flock to a church in Taiwan, usually. But that would be a way for us to let that community know that this place is set apart for Christ, for the Lord. And as Christians moved in or people interested, they would know that we're Christians. So it's just kind of a way to, mark our territory or something. Anyway, and it was helpful. We did meet some people as a result of hanging up that sign. The other thing I would say when you start a new church is you start with a core group of people, a solid core group, and you go from there. Well, after we'd been there for a little while, more people began moving in. We eventually met 3 women, these 3. All 3 of them were Christians. All 3 of them had been away from church for many, many years. The 2 younger women in green, they had grown up in Christian homes, but married non-Christian husbands and just, had been away from the church. The lady in the middle had gone through a messy divorce and deep depression, and had just not gone back to church. And we met them. And even though we were waiting, we weren't going to start anything, we had this sense of God saying, start for these 3 women. We didn't even know if they'd come if we started something, but there was that sense, start. And so we did. In January of 2020, we said, all right, come on over. We're just going to have a gathering here. We'll worship together. And like I said, we didn't know if they'd come, but they did. And they continued to come. And all 3 of them are now a part of the church, solid part of the churches. Anyway, third thing about church planting. You want to have kind of a good environment to invite people into, right? If people walk in the door and they just kind of see mess, they may not want to come back. Well, we didn't exactly have an ideal location. We had rented this 5-story townhouse thinking the first floor could eventually be a place for a church, but it wasn't quite there yet. For one thing, all we had was a garage door. When the garage door was up, we were up. It does have doorknobs. The other thing was when that young family, missionary family, went on their home assignment, we agreed to store all of their household belongings, which took up about 2/3 of that first floor, floor to ceiling. It really wasn't exactly an attractive place. So that was kind of the start of things. But people came. And God kept saying, go forward anyway. And even though we felt like everything we're doing was setting up for failure, God was doing something. So we started January of 2020, and a month later, our field got an unexpected email from that young family on home assignment. And they said, we've decided we're not going to come back to Taiwan as missionaries. We're going to stay in the U.S. and they're pastoring a church. Again, good family, a lot of different reasons for that. But everything changed for us. We thought we were leaving in about 5 months, and now we were staying to continue with this church plant. About the same time, God gave us a new missionary family. Very unique in that this couple was born in Taiwan, spent a lot of years in the U.S., but decided to go back to their home country. They didn't need visas. They still had their Taiwan citizenship. They didn't need to learn language. They were ready to jump right in. Jason and Andy Hud joined us in Tainan, and they're leading the church this day. And one of our last Sundays, we had a little gathering at the beach. That was some of the people that had come into the church before last summer. Our understanding is people continue to join in this little church, kind of a church that never should have gotten off the ground with some of the mess. But that's what God does. One church, a church that our enemy tried to destroy. Another church, because of messiness, shouldn't have gotten off the ground. But God, in His goodness, His greatness, He had a plan to overcome all of that and accomplish His will. In John 17, Jesus' prayer for us, He says, as you sent me into the world, I have sent them into the world. May they also be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. That verse isn't just for missionaries going to some place in the other side of the world. That's for every single one of us who follows Christ. We are being sent into the world to carry His presence. And I love what it says in 1 Peter 2:9. But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of Him who called you out of darkness into His wonderful light. So my encouragement, my challenge to you is a couple things. One is, no matter what kind of challenges or mess you may be facing, remember that our God is greater and He is able to do anything. And even the bad stuff that happens, ask what God has for us in the midst of it. That's perfect testimony for what we've seen God do. But I also challenge you to be present. to the lost and hurting world around you, or wherever God leads you in the future. He may call you to go to some of the dark places of this world. But our communities here in the U.S. are in great, great need. We live in a lost and hurting world. Wherever you are, bring God's presence, whether it be in your school, a place where you work, among your neighbors, your own family. Carry His presence to the people around you. Kim, would you come up and just share a bit more?
Be present. A friend of ours in Taiwan, another missionary, he calls it, you be the pastor wherever you are. If you work at 7-Eleven and you're a Christian, you're the pastor at 7-Eleven. If you work in the school and you're a Christian, you're the pastor in that school. You're going to be surrounded by people that need to know Christ, and you are present. Be present. Lean into Jesus. Pray for those divine appointments. See how God will use you wherever you might be. So, I picked up from the announcements this morning, the prayer request, that you have a man or a family or something leaving the church and moving to South Dakota. Is that, how many people are leaving? 2. You're going to be leaving? You're like the anchor on this church. I don't know what he did, but you're the anchor, right? No, this is great that you guys are in service in this church. Where are you going in South Dakota?
Broken.
Where?
Roten.
Maybe it's heard of that. They go now. Okay, so Groton, South Dakota. Okay, so you've got 2 people leaving this church. Here's what I want to challenge you to do. About a year ago, my wife and I were getting ready to come back to America to lead Gushing Grace Church on our home assignment. We've gone from that church for at least a year. We also had a young lady in our church who was going to be leaving shortly after us to go to Holland, country of Holland, not Holland, Michigan, to go to Holland to pursue graduate studies. So we knew our church, Gushing Grace Church, was going to lose 3 people in a short time. Small church. They lose 3 people. That's a big blow. So we began to pray. And I just prayed one Sunday morning before church. I said, Lord, would you give us at least 3 people to make up for the 3 that are leaving Gushing Grace Church? Half an hour later, a family of 5 walked into our church. And they said, in that housing development across the street that says, we're going to move there. We're going to make Gushing Grace Church our home. I want to challenge you. You've got 2 people leaving your church. Ask God. Ask God if He would be merciful and gracious to give you at least 2 people to make up for the 2 that are leaving. He'll do it. He'll do some amazing things. I could go on and on and share stories about people coming to faith and answers to prayer and things like that. God has been so good over the 32 years that we've been in Taiwan. So I just want to leave you that challenge. I want to give you one other challenge before I show a couple more slides and then wrap up very quickly. It's really easy to quantify certain things that we do for the gospel. Like I say, I'm in Taiwan and I'm doing my thing, and Penny and I live there and we're making contact, we're being present. You guys are back here, and there are certain things you can do for the gospel. There's 5 things you can do for the gospel for world evangelization. Number 1 is give. If you've never given to a missionary, today's your opportunity. My name is spelled Iverson. You can give. And that's easy to quantify, because every week I get a printout from our headquarters, and it says so-and-so gave so much money. Such and such a church gave so much money. I know exactly what's going on. But there's other things that we need you to do. We need you to be in prayer for us, because we go through some messy stuff, and we need to know people who have our backs in prayer. We need you to send out your people. My wife and I'm 64. I've got a few more years on the mission field, then guess what? We retire. Who's going to replace us? We need your people. We need your best people. Because it can be tough on the mission field. And I could list the over 50 countries where the Alliance is working around the world. They all need your people. Would you pray that God would send out people from RiverRock Church? And when they want to go, encourage them. Send them out with your blessing. Use the prayer. There's another thing you could do. You can go yourself. I was asked just 2 nights ago, if I'm older, is it too late? Absolutely not. We have people living in Taiwan that come as missionaries when they're older. And it's an organization, part of our alliance, called Marketplace Ministry. You go as a businessman, a teacher, something like that. And you can go into a country, you have to pay your own way, earn your own, but while you're in that country, you are present. And you're building those relationships, and you're building those bridges, and you're having chances to share the gospel. We have another arm of the alliance called Envision. They're primarily tapping into the 18 to 35-year-olds. Go with that. It's a more short-term thing. And you have to raise some support to be able to go. But then you go for anywhere from a month to a couple of years. And you can serve like that. There's a whole variety of ways that you could go to mission. So I want to challenge you to go. If God says, I want you to go, would you say I'm willing? That's all I said. When he called me. I didn't know what it looked like. I didn't know anything about missions, really. I was a young Christian. I heard these missionaries speak, and I felt God was speaking to me. And I said, God, I'm willing. I don't know if this is where you are, but I'm willing. 32 years later, here I am. Speaking at RiverRock. This is really cool. Okay, and the last thing that you can do is encourage. Encourage. When we lived in the countryside, we had a lady in our church who lived with her husband and family with the husband's father, who was elderly and sick. And they had a young Filipino lady taking care of her. And she was had a Catholic background. She would come to our church because she had Sunday mornings where she could sleep out of the house. Sleep the house, sleep the guy. And because the lady in that house, their daughter-in-law, came to our church, she said, yeah, you can come to our church as well. So her name was Arlene. Now, as we got to know Arlene, just began to spend a lot of time with her and me as a pastor. And I want you to know, I say this, it's a little scary, but I want you to know everything is above board. I would go out, and the guy is there, and I'd read the Bible with her and pray and read the discipleship stuff. But I want you to know it's all cool, right? Everybody knew what was going on. Last November, I got this line, it's a social media choice in Taiwan. And she wrote me, "Hi, Pastor Tim, how are you?" And by the way, I'm going to read it in her broken English. She's from the Philippines, so not perfect English. I message you today to say thank you for bringing me closer to God. And I praise God for using you in my life to know Him. You know that before, I really don't know about the gospel until you brought me a Bible to always read His words. Until now, I'm reading it. Thank you for your kindness and generosity. May God bless you. That's what we need. That's what keeps me going. That's what keeps me going back to Taiwan. When I get those notes of encouragement like that says, yes, I have actually, in some way, shape, or form, had an impact on somebody's life. We need that. We need that. So I want to encourage you. Be an encourager. Write those notes. You know some missionary out there? Send them a letter. Send them an email. Just say, hey, we're praying for you back here. You don't know what that is. So you can do that. It is your part in world evangelism. A big part of world mission. So, what are we doing? Well, that's a $64,000 question. We left Taiwan, and we had left Gushing Grace Church, and we kind of knew that we would go back and probably thought we knew what we'd be doing, but not for sure. And one thing we didn't want to do was go back to Gushing Grace Church for a variety of reasons, mainly because Jason and Andy Villa are pastoring it and we do a fine job. And so we were wondering, what's it going to look like? Well, I'm going to get there in a second. But Penny told you that we had a really rough time. Our plan was we wanted to come back to America. We have a house in Rochester, Minnesota. We bought it 4 years ago. And we just wanted to go back to our home and just chill out, process all the stuff we've been through, and just kind of get our feet back on this, right? So one night, we've been back last summer, 5 weeks, and we heard squealing of tires, and we heard a crash close to our house. And we live in a residential section of Rochester. And a split second later, it was very dark. We heard another crash, and we felt our house shudder. It's like, what is going on? And so it was very dark, When we got a light on, that's what our kitchen looked like. The car had hit our house. That's not my plan for home assignment. That's not my idea for how to get my feet back under me and how to process stuff. I wanted to chill. I didn't want to deal with insurance adjusters and construction companies and subcontractors. But God rarely listens to my plans. And that's what we're dealing with. And we are not done yet with the renovation. What is it, 7 months? So, that's just, I learned a phrase in Taiwan. In Mandarin Chinese, it says, 上可以搞定. It means God's got this. God's got this. God is in control. Through all of this mess, who shared this morning that you did? You were amazing. You're amazing. That you go through stuff, the airplane thing, and it's like, you don't know what's going on, and you don't know why, but God's there, right? And we didn't know why. But through this, we have so many opportunities to share the gospel and so many opportunities for Christian fellowship with believers. All because of this crash and the news that it generated in Rochester, Minnesota, and that part of Minnesota. So, we don't understand why, but we don't have to understand. God's in control. God's got this. Don't ever forget that. Please, 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 don't ever forget that. No matter what you face, no matter what you go through. And I can tell you story after story after story of people I have sat with who are going through horrible stuff. But they're saying God is good. So we're dealing with this on a lighter note. Well, I will say this too, and this, you kind of touched on this too. The last thing prepares you for the next thing. So we don't know how this is preparing us, but we do know it is preparing us somehow for whatever we're going to face in the future. On a positive note, we have a new granddaughter. So this is like the highlight of our, people applaud that like I had anything to do with it, right? So it's really cool. That's kind of like the highlight of our home assignment year. But what are we going to do when we go back? We kind of thought we knew. And as it turns out, when we go back, I will be the field director. And we don't look impressed. As well you should not. It means I'm kind of the boss of our missionary team in Taiwan. Comes with no perks except stress. And, we'll do it. It's not my strong suit, but I've done it before. I can do it. And I have some things. I have some directions I hope we can go in. I feel it kind of needs to shift our focus a little bit. So we'll see what God does through all that. But where we're going to live, we have no idea. What we're going to be doing for some other ministries, we have no idea. But I don't have to know. God's got this. He's in control. He knows, and it's enough. So, my name is Tim. You're going to forget that. I serve in Taiwan with Penny, my wife. You're going to forget that. We talked about being present. You very probably will forget all of that. But several years ago, I was in North Carolina, speaking in churches like I'm doing here. A guy took me to a flea market. We're walking up and down the roads, came around the corner, this row of tables, and there was this long row of tables stretched out ahead of us. The man stopped. And he turns to me and he says, Tim, there's a man selling socks. You should buy some red socks. Then you'll be known as the missionary with red socks. And I know where you're looking. I can see that. And I thought that's an excellent idea because, like I said, you're going to forget my name and where I'm from and what I've said to you today. But if you remember the missionary with red socks and you pray for the missionary with red socks, God will know who you mean and they'll honor your praise. That's right. Father, thanks so much that you've given Penny and I this chance to come here and meet some new people and enjoy their fellowship. And thank you for the speaking opportunities that you give us like this. And I want to pray that from this church you call some people to really lean into you in this area of missions and how they can be further involved with encouraging and sending out their people. Call somebody from this church, oh God. Call somebody from this church. Just say, I want you to leave all of this and go overseas. And may they be willing to say, Father, as we go home today, let us just think about our own situation. how we can be present wherever you appear. In Jesus' name, I pray.
I'll stand as we sing this last song together. The share before we sing this and it's talking about Exodus 33:14, and Lord, we find your presence will go with you, and I will give you rest. And I've shared I think before that this song I was listening to the guy who arranged it, I guess, because Praise Be All Around Me is actually the prayer of St. Patrick. And he said he was in Ireland in a cafe or restaurant or something. And he looked up, and Christ Be All Around Me, the whole prayer song to St. Patrick was written around the border of the city, around the entire room, so you couldn't get away. And I thought about God's presence and being present wherever we are. He's present with and through us. So.